All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being on tonight. I see quite a few familiar faces and some faces from around the state that want to welcome you to this meeting, our first meeting of the Permanent Rules Committee of the 2024 Texas Democratic Party Convention. This meeting is officially called to order as of 6:39 p.m. My name is Cardall Coleman, and I'm the chair of the Permanent Rules Committee. I'm joined tonight by a few friends, Susan Bradley, who is our committee vice chair. Susan, would you wave so the folks can see you?
It looks like she's away from her desk.
Like you stepped away. All right, she'll be back, and you'll definitely hear from Susan tonight. And then we also have our secretary for this evening, Mr. Randall Bryant, who is here with us as well. And our parliamentarian for the state party convention and for the convention, Dina Tollerton, committee staff for the party business advisor, Marco Orenthia. Correct me if I butchered that, Marco.
Orantia, Mr. Chair.
Orantia. He's here as well in his role as staff, and then as well as in a role as committee member. We're going to try to move through tonight as expeditiously as possible. I want to go ahead and kind of do some quick housekeeping, rule setting. It's our intent to move this meeting along in expeditious manner. We do not want to be like other committees that have met well into the night, into the next day, 2 a.m. I want to make sure that we're protecting your time. We're handling party business, but also we are protecting your time as well. So we want to be efficient in how we conduct tonight's meeting. So with that, just want to lay out if, in fact, we have a secondary meeting, if in fact if we need it to go, if we go to 10:30 p.m., we hope to have all party business done tonight. But if we have to extend, we want to make sure that we end the meeting tonight so that you can protect your time and then also come back if we have to do that. But the goal and the intention of tonight is to get as much done or all of our party business done this evening, right? With that, wanted to do a roll call. So, Mrs. Secretary, will you please use Zoom login for roll call to ensure that we have quorum tonight?
Would you like me to call one by one to ask for president, or how would you like me to do that?
Yeah, if we can make it expeditious, Mr.
Sure.
Secretary, and just you can see visually and everyone can see visually who's here.
Thank you.
Keep going. Thank you.
Right. Once you have that, will you please confirm that we have quorum?
Mr. Chair, I believe we have 32 members of 36 present, and we do have quorum.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That is a really good show, and thank you all for being here tonight. I want to jump quickly into the explanation of the process. You'll hear a lot from Marco tonight as he introduces each one of these items, but we want to talk about the explanation of the process. So we've been tasked with making a recommendation to the body on each of these items that have been passed by 10 or more county/CDs. Right. So in our county conventions, which most of you attended, these items were passed by 10 or more. So we don't have the power to keep these items from the body, but we also cannot make the amendments ourselves. But we can propose that a committee substitute and recommend the adoption of the substitute. I know this is a little different than most of us may be used to, particularly those who are used to ledge or congressional committees. So tonight we will take up each item for discussion. The items have been referred to us and put in order that we will hopefully keep related to items together. So these items are already packaged to ones that kind of make sense to be together are together, right? So rules, limits on debate. we want to make sure that we're, again, respecting your time. So we're going to have limits of debate. The limits of debate shall be limited to 6 speakers, right? So 3 for the item and 3 against the item, and then we'll alternate those. So one who is for it, one is against it, and we'll alternate those. If there is a amendment, the special rule of the order limits debate on amendments to a maximum of 4 speakers, 2 for and 2 against, and then those 2 will alternate as well. Limits of debate up to 2 minutes each, right? So each person will have 2 minutes to argue their point for or against. All speakers shall be limited to 2 minutes again, and then unless the time is extended by majority vote of the committee. So our voting methods will be the vote sheet, roll call sheet. Does everyone have access to the roll call vote sheet? Just want to make sure. I don't want to get too far into voting and someone can't vote. Does everyone have access to that sheet? If you do not, you can come off mute and let me know.
I just put it in the chat, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right, perfect.
Where is it located?
It's in the chat for anyone who is on their phone. Marco, could you explain for individuals who may be on by their phone? I think everyone is laptop or desktop. I'm seeing.
Mr. Chair, do you mind if I just share it on
ahead.
the screen so people can see?
Perfect. And so they can see what it looks like.
Yes. One moment. All right. So the idea is hopefully, this requires a little bit of permissioning to see if you're on the right Google account and everything. And we can attempt to fix that. But I would say the majority of people have access to their individual row. So for instance, Jeremy from CD3, try to click the yes and no button here. See if you have access to click it. If you don't, you might just be permissioned on the incorrect Google account. And so I can work to help do that, but also you can also just tell me hey, Marco, if you I can't vote, mark me down as yes for this vote, and I can go and click it. So we can either essentially fix the permissioning issue, which can kind of get a little tricky because it depends what Google account you're logged in. If you have a non-Google account, is that permission, et cetera, et cetera. But if I can help facilitate the vote by you just verbally saying, mark me down as a yes, and we can do roll call votes pretty quickly. Yeah. Mr. Chair, the Secretary has a question.
Sorry, I was muted. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When we get to this portion, can we, in the column to the right, just add and I'll do it, but just want to get your permission to add the rule number that we're actually voting on at that time to ensure everyone.
Yes. Thank you for mentioning that. I think the intent is to go to column E1, G1, I1, and so forth, and write what that
The rule numbers is
on puppies and rainbows. Yeah. So basically to just write it in here to get more specific. Does that work?
yes. Thank you.
Okay. But Mr. Chair, I think the intent is maybe to do a lot of this, through consensus and then unanimous consent. But if there's any opposition, then we would use these. We wouldn't use them for every single item. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. All right, that's a perfect segue. Talk about voting methods. So that is what that document will look like at the time of voting. I believe staff will put that on screen so that we can see this process and so that you are voting and your vote's been counted. But our voting methods, when it comes to time for a vote, we'll start with the unanimous consent, like Marco just said, to try to save ourselves some time. And I'll ask, is there any objection to recommending adoption of this rule proposal? Right. So is there any objection to recommending this adoption? If there is an objection, we'll move forward to the roll call sheet. Most of you should have access to this by now because it's in the chat. And so that's the process that we'll use for that. To make it easier on ourselves, we're going to wait for a motion to be made. When voting yes, I think we just kind of walk through that, but I just want to make sure that it's clear when voting yes to be recommended, voting yes to voting yes to an item is to recommend it for an adoption. Voting no for an item is to recommend it that it not be adopted. So just so we're clear, all yes votes are to recommend. All no votes are to not recommend. So if this is a basic motion, then the item will be placed on the consent agenda under recommended adoption. And if the motion fails, the item will be placed on the consent agenda under recommended not to adopt. Right? If there are any committee substitutes, it will be handled as an amendment. It requires a second and takes a majority vote. Discussion on the item is separate from the discussion on the main item and will be contained in the consent of the amendment. Right? All right. Give me just one moment here.
Marco.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, Mr. Chair, the one thing I'm sure people probably already know, but there are some vacancies from certain CDs for this committee. So you know, to help get some representation from those CDs that do not have a member for whatever the reason is, we've appointed some temporary members. Some temporary convention officers from those congressional districts to participate. And so the idea is for you to recognize them as their members, but technically those members wouldn't be able to make motions or to vote. So, but they still have, you know, they're representing their congressional district. So in other words, if you're on here and you're one of those temporary people, you wouldn't have access to vote on the sheet because you're a temporary member.
Perfect.
For just my record keeping, could you just inform me of who those individuals are, please?
It's marked on, regardless of where you're looking for the sheet, it'll say permanent member and temporary member. So, ooh, you know what? It's not annotated on the sheet. Now that I see it, I can edit that. But I will show on the screen where to find it. 1 second. All right, so if you go to txdem.co/committee members. And then go to rules, it'll say who the temporary members are. So I think we have Leslie from CD 13. That might be it. Oh, nope. Wait. I think that might be it. So, hi, Leslie. Sorry. Yeah, because the other districts did not provide someone to appoint at this time.
All right. One last thing as far as our voting process, again, to try to keep us as close to on time as possible, when we've exhausted the limits of debate, which will be tallied by our secretary, I'll let you know, or our secretary will let you know. So I just want to kind of reiterate on that. So I would like for you guys to respect that process. Once we have 3 in the affirmative, 3 in the negative, 3 for or against, we will have exhausted our limits of debate. Right. I see one hand. Before we get started, Fidel, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, I'm having trouble opening that link for the voting sheet. And it takes me to an account that I have to go to another account, which throws me off.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy if there's any members that have any issues basically just verbally say it and I'll take the vote for you.
Oh, that'll work.
And what's nice also is I can show the screen to the public while we're on live stream as well, so it'll be pretty transparent too.
Okay. I believe we are ready for the presentation of the first item, if nothing else.
Dina, do you want to handle screen sharing on these or do you want me to?
Whichever is easiest.
Yeah, can you go ahead and take lead?
I can do
Or-
that. Let me get that. All right, so our first item is going to be, you'll see the new tab that just opened.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So the item is rule
Dina,
one.
before you continue, can you zoom in, like maybe make it to 200% in the, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so Rule 1003, establishing consistent voting requirements in state party rules. So, whereas the rules of the Texas Democratic Party contain several voting requirements that are inconsistently or improperly expressed, whereas such voting margins contribute to confusion and improper implementation, whereas Robert's Rules of Order newly revised establishes recommended wording for voting margins, from which our party's rules should not deviate without good cause. Now therefore be it resolved that Article 5, Section A of the Texas Democratic Party rules be amended by striking 51% and inserting a majority. Be it further resolved that Article 8, Section J of the rules be amended by striking 51% of its members present and inserting a majority of its members present and voting. Be it further resolved that Article 10, Section C.5 of the rules be amended by striking 2/3 vote of those present and inserting 2/3 vote of those present and voting. That is all.
All right, thank you so much. All right. Is there any objection to adopting this motion?
Yes,
Sir, you have a question from Mark Meyer?
I object.
Okay, is there a second?
No, not a second, sir.
And
Is there discussion? Before we go that.
All right. Any
I guess
discussion?
has it been moved first?
We're not, this is, we don't need to have a motion on it because these are the
Okay.
items for the body.
Okay, open up for discussion. I see a hand, Alex.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was the author of this rule, so I'm happy to go through it. Basically, the intent here is to make our voting margins consistent. I don't want to rehash the preamble, but there are some differences in how we do our voting margins in different parts of the rules. Some of them say 51%, some of them say majority, some say present, some say present in voting. There are two main changes this rule makes. First, it eradicates 51% because a majority is not 51%. It is more than half. And in my view, people, if there's a 51% written, really the intent is that it be more than half. So this is just to make that consistent throughout the rules. And then second is that a vote that's actually taken in a meeting is out of those present and voting. Usually that's what you want when you're taking a vote, because if the voting margin is out of those present, that means people aren't able to abstain from the vote because it's out of those present. So if you're abstaining, it's essentially counted as a no. That's not usually what you want, except for very specific things like the percentage of people required to order a roll call vote. So any vote that is taken in a meeting, this rule would change it from present to present in voting. This applies for the fraction of the CEC that is required to authorize an expenditure, and one of the rules that relates to the endorsement process for district committees, which we're going to consider later in Rule 1025. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity to lay out this rule.
Thank you. Mark?
Well, my first statement on this is I agree that we need to get rid of the 51%. That I agree with you 100% on that opinion. However, I think we're being inconsistent here. I mean, if we're going to be majority of the members present in voting, we need to be consistent, except where that difference is not authorized by the election code. I did go through, and there were a few different places where the election code mandated certain wording on this, so we can't change those. But I also disagree with the statement that this takes away from the power of people abstaining. And then if we're going to desire a majority vote to pass anything, or a 2/3 vote to pass anything, it should be a 2/3 vote or a majority vote of those present, of everyone present, so that it actually is a true majority vote, rather than of those voting. Abstentions still have meaning, but we should be looking for majority votes on anything that requires that, or 2/3 votes on anything that requires that.
Thanks so much. See one more hand. Kat?
Yes, I think this is a great amendment. I spent most of last year writing bylaws for Tarrant County Democratic Party, and myself and my major collaborator spent quite a lot of time going through Robert's rules and the election code and what percentages were mandated and what we could modify. And this would have helped a lot.
Thanks so much. Susan Bradley. You're muted, Susan, we can't hear you. Susan?
Sorry. Got too excited there. I actually wrote part of that election code to amend one of the sections to change it to 2/3 of those present and voting, because there can be situations where you have people who are present who for some reason cannot vote, which tripped us up in Dallas County once, which is why I made that change to the election code, which got passed and signed into law.
Mr. Chair,
Sir?
Ms. Bradley, could you confirm that was in support of the motion?
Yes.
Okay, that's 3 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative.
Okay. Thank you so much. Fidel? And would you let us know if you're...
Yeah, question.
Would you please
Just
state...
hello, this is Fidel. Just to clarify that last statement, when was that changed into law?
2017.
What was the article?
It's been a while. I don't remember the exact article. It had to do with replacing candidates on a ballot when they die before the election.
I agree with changing the 51%, but so let's stay with the affirmative. I just wanted clarification on that, on the passage of that election code.
Okay. Are there any other speakers who would like to...
There gotta be one more left in the negative.
Right. Anyone else? Anyone else? Mr. Secretary.
So I guess if we're using the roll call vote, if you all could go to the roll call sheet and indicate your votes. And Fidel, I think you are the only one that I know of, at least thus far, that's indicated you want to do your voice vote. We'll capture it, and I believe that's a no vote. Is that correct, Fidel?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Not sure I want to vote against puppies and rainbows, though.
We will get that name changed.
It's changed.
Thanks, Mark. Again, just want to remind you guys, a vote for is to recommend, a vote against is to not recommend.
Is there any member that needs help voting that I can vote for them?
Yeah, Alan Jamel votes for.
Yes, me
Fine.
too.
That's Nancy Sanders.
Nancy Sanders.
Yes, vote for.
Okay.
Thank you.
Marco, it's Mo Jenkins. If you could click me voting in the affirmative.
What number are you, Mo?
PD 18.
18. And you said 4, correct? Oh, you're marked 4.
To Garrett.
Marcos, Casey McLean, CD4, vote yes.
Mr. Chair, you ready for the results?
We are.
With 27 in the affirmative, 3 in the negative, the motion passes.
Thank you so much. All right. We have our next item, please.
Helps if I'm not muted. Our next item is 1016. Article 2A, beliefs, justice, and law. So therefore be it resolved to amend Article 2A by striking that the Texas Democratic Party stands for law and order, for total and unceasing war against crime, for strengthening law enforcement agencies, and for justice under law. And replacing with that the Texas Democratic Party stands for the rule of law, for safe and crime-free communities, for strengthening well-trained and accountable law enforcement agencies, and for justice under law. See if I can get these on one page for y'all. And Mr. Chair, I believe it is to you.
Thank you so much. Is there any objection to recommending adoption of this rule? Hearing none, the item is adopted. Next item, please.
Okay, we have 1023, updating the SDEC committee's chair and vice chair balancing language. Whereas the use of the co-chairs in subsection E was improper and the gender language was solely binary, the following amendment is offered. Now therefore be it resolved to amend Article 8E by striking E, standing SDEC committee membership. Members of standing SDEC committees will be appointed by the state chair with the advice and consent of the SDEC. The state chair will appoint one chair and one vice co-chair who will be gender balanced, and the members of each of the committees will elect a second vice co-chair. And replace it with E, standing SDEC committee membership. Members of standing SDEC committees will be appointed by the state chair with the advice and consent of the SDEC. The state chair will appoint one chair and one vice chair who will be of different gender identities, and the members of each of the committees will elect a second vice chair.
Thank you. Marco, did you have a question?
I have an administrative issue, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
This last rule that we just did, the chair asked for unanimous consent, and that was given. So we're not using the roll call sheet that you guys used for the very first rule in the cases of that. We're only, if it's unanimous consent, we don't need to mark it down. But if we do take if it's not unanimous consent and we take a roll call, then mark the sheet. I just, someone brought up in the chat that I think 2 members had marked yes. So essentially, don't mark it if it's unanimous consent. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks so much for that clarification. All right, on this item, is there any objection to recommending adoption of this rule proposal? All right, hearing none.
Yes, question. Question.
Yes, sir.
I'm looking at that, the second vice chair, is that something new that we're adding to it?
Mr. Chair, do you mind if I answer since I'm the author?
Go ahead.
Yes, so none of this is new. I think it's in the whereas, like the explanation. I think co-chair is just an improper use. It should just be chair. But no, this is not new. There has always been a second vice chair that's elected by the committee. So this is just sort of a cleanup, one, to realize gender identities, but also to get rid of that word co-chair, the co before chair, excuse me.
Thank you.
All right, hearing no objection, this item is adopted. Thank you all so much.
Okay, the next item is 1021. Not sure if y'all want me to read the whole thing here. The
I think a synopsis will be fine.
So
Dana, before you get started, Marco, do you have a question, a point of information?
Yeah, I think it might be helpful. I think the link to this sheet that the committee was provided, maybe to provide it somehow on the screen publicly, the txtem.co/24-perm-rules. That way, if the public wants to view this sheet, it might be a little bit easier. If you're able to post that in some way.
Okay.
I just got a request from the public viewing, essentially.
Gotcha. Okay.
not sure how we would do that.
Go to your first tab and see where it says Permanent Rules Committee in the title. Just put a dash txdem.co/24-PERM for permanent dash rules. And you can just bold and hyperlink that, and maybe members of the public will be able to see it and catch on if needed. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. While we're waiting, Philip, did you have a question?
Yes, sir. If you don't mind making the screen bigger, I guess
Okay.
several windows open and it's still in a
So I
large font.
was trying to get it all on one page so that you could see the two side by side in this screen. I can zoom in further, but if I do it much more, you're not gonna be able to read everything.
I'll try and do the comparison, but thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Marco, did you have something else?
No.
Thanks. All right, Dina, we are ready for you.
Okay. So it adds first, unless stated otherwise in an auxiliary organization governing documents. Then the language is the same. The chair or president and the next highest ranking officer of the organization who identifies as a different gender, except Texas Democratic Women, shall serve as the representative members on the SDEC. For the Hispanic Caucus, the representative members shall be 2 representatives elected by the Hispanic Caucus at the state convention, unless stated otherwise in an auxiliary organization governing documents. In the event that any such person already is a member of the SDEC or is unable or ineligible to serve, the next highest ranking officer who identifies as a different gender than the remaining SDEC member shall be the additional member. They shall participate in the proceedings of the SDEC insofar as the Texas Election Code will permit. So the difference between the two, this is allowing the organizations to decide unless they, so it defaults to the president and the next highest ranking officer of a different gender. But it allows the organizations to decide if they would like to choose their SDEC representatives in another manner.
Right, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Who's speaking? Sorry.
Craig Starrett. I don't have the hand option.
Okay, go ahead.
This is just a point of information for this request. I'm not fully understanding what the author is trying to convey to us and in this language. Is the language intended to serve that whoever the SDEC recommends that they just be allowed to identify whatever they want to identify as? Is that what we're basically saying here? Or am I just getting the wrong interpretation?
Marco?
If we got the author, that'd be great if the author could expound.
Yeah, I'm the author. That's not what we're not trying to fix gender identity here. We had already done that in a previous update of this rule. What this is specifically is most of the auxiliary organizations of the SDEC. So in other words, they have 2 seats on the SDEC. I think there's 13 different bodies, from County Chairs Association to Black Caucus, Hispanic Caucus. Most of them already have an affiliated organization connected with that caucus. So an example, Coalition of Black Democrats, they have their elections usually in like December of odd years. So the way that someone becomes the way that someone becomes the 2 members that represent the Black Caucus / the affiliated organization that it's with, the Coalition of Black Democrats, the way you get your 2 members on the SDEC is they get elected president and vice president. But just in case the president and vice president, I forget the bylaw specifically for coalition, but let's say it doesn't mandate that's a different gender. So an example would be veterans. Veterans right now, the president and vice president both are males. So the vice president isn't the automatic member. It's the next highest ranking person in their bylaws by default of a different gender. So Martha Williams isn't the vice president, but she's vice chair. I can't remember her exact title, but that's how she's on the SDC. This happens for numerous organizations like Texas Democratic Women. The president is a statutory member for a specific Senate district. So she's not serving in her role as president so you have to go to the next highest ranking. It's the vice president, the next highest ranking person on Texas Democratic Women. So that's already in the rules. The issue, and I think that's what this is titled, if I'm going back to this is the fix for the Hispanic Caucus in particular. Because, am I wrong? Am I misremembering?
That's a
Um,
different one. This is
I'm
tied-
sorry.
Auxiliary organization, our shorthand summary
Oh.
was to allow organization to decide their SD rep.
I'm sorry. I think I have 10 rules before this committee and I kind of get them all mixed up. So what this one's saying is if that organization so chooses, it doesn't have to automatically be president, vice president, or president and person of the next of a different gender that's a highest ranking. That organization can literally choose if they wanted to, per their bylaws and per their structures. This is our representative on the SDC that's not necessarily tied to to a specific officer. I think the idea is, defaulting to president and vice president. Maybe those people don't want those duties. Maybe they want to run the organization and they want to leave the SDC up to, someone else, right? Or maybe, certain tactics or certain experience of the president and vice president doesn't necessarily fit with the organization, and there's someone who's more capable. So it essentially leaves up to those caucuses who should be the representatives. And Hispanic is a little bit of a cutout because there's multiple Hispanic Democratic organizations there. So there's not an official auxiliary organization. They're just elected at convention. And there's another rule that deals with them that I think I started to talk about and didn't mean to. Thank you.
All right, thanks for the clarification. Just seems like the language here is a little wordy and could be misconstrued. I think it could be a little bit concise and getting to the point in saying that if it is this point to what you just noted, that to give them the option to elect who they want to elect from these auxiliary organizations, that we just say that in the new wording instead of trying to in the essence go around the mulberry bush with it. Just my thoughts on it. But that was my point of information. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Craig. All right. Is there any objection to recommending this item for adoption?
Question. Sorry about that. When we're looking at one specific item here, is the Hispanic caucus. And in the clarity of it all, when we look at the auxiliary organizations representatives, there are three major Hispanic organizations that are tied into the Hispanic caucus. So you're giving us the option to pick someone from the auxiliary organization, be it president on down. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, if I could, I probably did not do a good job of explaining this when I first read everything.
What?
So the top language, what I'm highlighting here, that's what exists now.
Correct.
The language down here, there's very little that has changed. Primarily, it is just the unless stated otherwise in an auxiliary organization's governing documents. The rest of it already exists there, and there is another rule that deals with the Hispanic caucus representative.
I agree with you on that, but what it entails here to me is that that right now, any of the three auxiliary organizations have not dealt with this situation. It's new.
I'm sorry, the Hispanic caucus would the unless stated otherwise in an auxiliary organization governing documents would not apply to the Hispanic caucus.
Thank you so much. Marco? Nope, sorry. Yeah, I think you're muted, Marco.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I think there might be confusion of the difference between an auxiliary organization and a caucus. So there's no official auxiliary organization for the Hispanic caucus. there is for all the other caucuses. So this would not affect the Hispanic caucus or the 3 organizations that are not the auxiliary affiliated organizations.
All right. Thanks so much for that clarification. Mo, do you have a question? Point of information?
Yeah, it was more just informational
Okay.
after listening to everybody. When I first read this, my understanding of it is, and I'm coming from the perspective of talking about TYD, we host Youth Caucus, but we also have our SDEC folks. My understanding was that if TYD decided to amend its bylaws to say it's no longer going to be president and vice president who are going to be our SDEC reps, but we are going to elect 2 people of 2 various, gender identities to be our elected SDEC reps. We could do that without violating TDP rules. This was in no way of like creating new gotcha scenarios, but was just allowing folks that flexibility, because I know in the past that has affected some organizations from being able to elect the people that they think are going to do the best job because they're worried about preserving their SDEC seats. And so that's how I understood it. My other understanding that the only difference was that first part of the sentence, the unless stated otherwise in an auxiliary organization governing documents, had nothing to do with the individual caucuses, but the organizations that they may be attached to. I just want to make sure I'm correct on that.
That is correct.
All right. Is there, now that we have all of our points of information across, is there any objection to recommending the adoption of this item?
Yes.
Okay, and that is Fidel? Yep. All right, any discussion on this item?
I'd like to expand a little bit further on that. Why I'm objecting to it. Because at this point, when we meet in El Paso, we'll elect 2. Then male, female. If one of them, for some reason or another, cannot be there, maybe whether it's a male or female, then we have to find another method or way to elect another representative to be on the non-statutory SDEC. Unless I'm not reading it correctly.
That is not how this is written, and doesn't apply to that. There is another rule proposal coming up that does address that and allows for a way to.
Excuse me. But why would we want to present this way, and then we're going to go to another rule to clarify the whole thing? What is this?
Sorry.
I mean, we got an issue here with the way it is presented. Regardless of who authored it, it doesn't matter. But the players to the Hispanic caucus is a constant turnover every 2 years, except for those who pertain to the Tejano Democrats, the Mexican American Democrats, and the Progressive Hispanics. Those are the only 3 organizations that are consistent with the Hispanic caucus.
Right, but this rule change does not apply to those organizations.
I understand that.
CC seats are governed under a different section.
Then why bring this one on this?
So that the other organizations who can choose who are their SDEC representatives.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, might be recognized as the author.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I want to just do a quick time check with the secretary, make sure that we're within time limits of debate.
We are, at this point, I only have actually one in the negative. I don't have any in support. We've had a few points of information. I think we're in the objection to the consent. And so you're allowing Mr. Marco to address, but going forward, anyone needs to be speaking in the affirmative or the negative, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Also, to that point, when you are recognized, will you state at the beginning before your statement if you are for or against the item? All right, Marco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, to try to solve, maybe some of Mr. Acevedo's concerns. So I know you're concerned about those particular issues. That's taken care of in another item because it's a different section. So it's a different amendment. We'll talk about it here shortly about how do you elect people specifically from the Hispanic caucus, because there's not an affiliated organization tied to it, because there are multiple. The other caucuses don't have that. So that's not an issue. But what this rule is for is not to solve that problem. What this rule is for is that if an auxiliary organization that is affiliated with a caucus, so that's literally everyone right now, from environmental to Black to AAPI, all of those have an affiliated organization. And I know there's a rule where we're trying to do an affiliated organization with Indigenous people that's coming later. Does not affect any of those caucuses it does affect all of those caucuses except for the Hispanic caucus, because in particular, Hispanic does not have an affiliated organization. So if one of those organizations, if it's a coalition of Black Democrats or Asian American Democrats of Texas, if they want to send 2 other people, they have that ability if they do that in their bylaws. Please vote for this. Thanks.
All right, thanks so much. Is there, see another hand, Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alex Mead, Congressional District 37 in favor. I want to make it sure it's clear, this rule does not affect an organization unless the organization amends its governing documents to designate different people for the SDEC. As a consequence, it won't affect the Hispanic caucus at all. The reason it's drafted this way was that the author made a drafting choice that I think was one of many reasonable drafting choices available to him, to include the full text of the rule before and after. And because the rule talks about the Hispanic caucus, if he's going to do that, he has to include the parts about the Hispanic caucus, even if the rule isn't going to change any of that. So I hope that makes it clearer why I think this is a good change and why I'm going to support it.
Thank you so much. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair, you have Kenna Griffin. She's raising her hand. Actually raising her hand.
Okay,
Yeah, I can't find the little hand thing either.
no problem. Come on.
I just, the more I look at this, the more it seems like it ought to be subdivided into 3 sections, maybe small a, small b, and small c. And that might reduce some confusion on this, because I initially assumed it sort of, affected everybody else. But if it's really for 3 different subtopics, then I'm wondering if at some point maybe just doing a small lowercase a, lowercase b, lowercase c might be helpful in clarifying.
Ms. Griffin, just for clarification, was that in favor or against?
It's okay. It's just the whole thing is kind of confusing to me.
So you're in favor. Okay,
So I guess I'm for it.
thank you so much. Mark?
My recommendation suggestion is, I think along the same lines as Kenna. I'll go ahead and call this though against. Perhaps we need to look at, and maybe this is for the 2026 cycle, look at combining 2 and 3 with respect to how SDEC members are elected, or recommending to the auxiliary organizations that they define how they're going to choose their SDEC members in their governing documents. That's my comment.
Anyone else? Make sure I'm not missing any hands.
Mr. Chairman, this is Craig from CD 16. I am against it, and I will justify it because I believe that it probably needs to be rewritten to capture what it is we are trying to support. In addition to my debate of opposition, I place a supplemental motion on the floor to table this and send it back to the authoring committee.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
number one, that ends debate. I think that motion may be out of order. There aren't any other committee taking up this work, but the committee we have here.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Seeing as there is no more discussion and or we've reached the limit of our debate, we'll proceed with the vote. Okay. All right. All those, let's see.
No.
Via the roll call sheet.
Roll call sheet. Yep. Thank you. And then once that's on the screen, we will proceed with voting again. Those who are in favor to recommend will vote yes. Those who are not in favor to recommend will vote no.
I know that we fixed probably Mo Jenkins' access issue. Is there any members that need to help voting?
Fidel.
Fidel? Yes or no?
No.
Sorry, can you say your CD?
That's CD 10.
10, thank you.
Just to double check, the first column is yes and the second column is no?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'll go ahead and make that more clear at the top. Give me 1 second. There you go. Is it more clear now?
Yes, thank you.
Marco, this is Casey McLean, CD4. For some reason, I'm not able to vote. Please vote yes.
Do you have an account that you usually use with Google by any chance?
Yeah, earlier I could, but okay, let's see if, all right. Well, but nothing was responding.
Got it. I'm happy to
We'll
just look
check.
for you.
Okay, we'll check next time, see if it works.
Mr. Chair, you ready for the vote?
Marco, is there a link to the sheets that have passed the temporary rules committee?
Mr. Chair, is it okay if I answer that?
Absolutely.
Nothing passed the temporary rules committee. There wasn't 2/3 support for anything. So what we're looking at is everything that's been referred to permanent. And I can provide that link in the chat to re-up it, but it should be in your calendar invite as well.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Secretary?
With 25 in favor, 6 opposed, the motion passes.
All right. Thank you all so much.
Mr. Chairman, a point of privilege affecting the assembly.
Go ahead.
My record of the vote on Rule 1003 indicates that it passed by 27-3, and the roll call sheet indicates that it passed by 28-3. I just want to make sure, for having a durable record, is it possible to lock the vote columns after each vote is taken?
I can facilitate that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It
Thanks.
did pass 27-3. That is correct.
Thank you so much. All right. Next item, please.
All right, the next item is 1020. Exception to SDEC membership for labor union SDEC representation. Whereas in order to conform with, that needs to be adjusted there, the Texas AFL-CIO Constitution and TDP rules, the following amendment is offered. Adding to the beginning of B, not including labor unions, so that it reads, Marco, apparently the letters are missing here. Do you know? I see this, we're not including labor unions. The item is on, so this section right here, this is the letter B. Not including labor unions allow for at-large memberships if the group consists of chapters and allow all members to vote in officer elections. Mr. Chair, it's to you.
All righty, thank you so much. Is there any objection to recommending this item for adoption? Hearing none, the item is recommended for adoption. Next item, please.
The next item is 1022. SDEC vacancy recommendation election procedures, also known as the Hispanic Caucus fix. So where is the inserted section? I apologize, I'm not familiar with this particular rule. Marco, is this the correct one?
I have to double check 1 second.
This appears to just be adding the voting method.
Yeah, I think this one's not titled correctly.
No, it's not.
This one should be probably titled something along the lines vacancy replacement elections for SDEC members.
Not sure why it was called Hispanic Caucus fix then. Okay. Then we'll have to find which one is the Hispanic Caucus fix because we have one of them. It will be, so this one appears to be the only difference. Sorry, I'm going to zoom out. We take out the shall mail, correct?
Correct.
And then it adds the ability for the state chair or the designee to determine the voting method to be used in the election. Was there any other changes?
I'm pretty sure that's it. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's it.
Right. See two questions here. Jeremy, do you have a point of information.
Yeah, just the point of information, we skipped 1020.
No, we heard 1020.
Mr. Chair, 1020 was unanimous consent.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. Miriam?
Yes, Mr. Chair, on this one, can I make a recommendation we postpone it until they fix the language and just bring it back later?
The language itself is fine. It was the title, which I already fixed on the page.
Okay, I was just making sure, like, if we gotta make changes to this one, if we could like push it back and,
There's
know.
no changes to be made. It's already done.
Okay. Just
Right.
making sure.
All right, Dina, are you ready?
Yes, I believe so.
Mr. Chair, you have a hand raised from Alex Mead.
Hey, Alex.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify from the author, is the intent that this allow people to vote, that the voting method could be an electronic vote outside a meeting, or would this still be the vote happening during the Congressional District Committee meeting?
Mr. Chair, do you mind if I directly answer?
No problem.
Yeah, so this one has just been, since I've had this position, I think we've done it a couple of different ways, and also looking at the election code and looking at the rules, it's just been a little bit weird to facilitate. Also, during the COVID time period, is essentially someone's off the SDC for some reason. And this is statutory members in particular. So they move out of district, they resign, they're removed. We've had one of those. So essentially, how do you, in between conventions, run a replacement election? And so I think originally we were doing it via mail ballots. I don't think maybe that was appropriate, the exact way we were doing it. And so there's been some ideas of like, can you do it at a meeting? Is this something to where you have a Zoom, et cetera, et cetera. And just the way that it's structured, I wanted to sort of give a little bit of freedom in that ability to do it. And then once the SDC meets, this upcoming cycle, this new SDC, and we have this in order where it's a little bit more flexible, I would want the advice of members, and also in particular that member that's having to essentially help conduct this election, if there's more flexibility to be able to hold that election. So I'm not sure exactly what method we should use, and I'm open to suggestions and getting feedback as part of facilitating this for the chairman as, the staff designee. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly what is the best method, and I know that we've used some in the past, so I'm open-minded, but wanted to give that flexibility essentially.
In that case, Mr. Chairman, I have a parliamentary inquiry.
Okay.
Would this rule as written, if adopted, allow the vote to be taken outside of a meeting, or would the vote still have to be taken during a meeting?
Madam Parliamentarian?
It is my reading and opinion that it would allow for it to be taken outside of a meeting. That is already allowed for other replacement elections and other positions.
Thank you.
All right. Angel, do you have a point of information?
Are we still waiting on whether or not there's objections? Have we got to that?
This is your opportunity if you have point of information before we do that.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay. All right.
I do want to follow up on that parliamentary inquiry, though.
Okay, go ahead, Mark.
Because right in the middle, where it says the state chair or designee shall give notice of the meeting to consider such nomination to the members of the Congressional District Committee. Does that change the parliamentarians' opinion as to whether a meeting would be required?
A meeting to consider it does not mean the vote has to be taken during that meeting.
Thank you.
Marco?
And just to, the reason why I think that edit's in there, in particular that member Meyer brought up, is a particular replacement election that happened in Jefferson County, where I think the county chair sent out the notice, and there was some back and forth as if that was an appropriate notice, even if they said that it was by the chairman. So I think that was sort of giving a little bit of flexibility. So that was just sort of a problem that we had. So that's why that language is there.
Marco, was that 2016 or was that more recent?
I mean, post-COVID.
Okay. There was one in Montgomery, Jefferson County at that 2016 time period. That's why I was wondering.
Okay. I believe we have one more question. Jeffrey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would SDC members receive any kind of notice of a vacancy or an election? Is that covered?
May I answer, Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. SEC members wouldn't receive notice because they're not going to be in the district, right? The person because there's two, we're only talking about statutory members, so none of the add-on, auxiliary caucuses like we were talking earlier. So this is essentially what will be CDs 1 through 38. So if there's a vacancy in CD 35 where I'm at, then the person running that meeting is going to be the other CD 35 chair. So you're not going to give notice to the SDC. You would give notice to the eligible voters. And the eligible voters are the precinct chairs that are currently seated within the districts within those counties and those counties that CD requires. So, CD 35, for example, has a portion of Travis. So the notice would only go out to those precinct chairs. So yeah, precinct chairs, the notice would go out. SDC wouldn't. What would happen is those precinct chairs make the recommendation, and then that recommendation goes to the SDC for approval, which should be just a thumbs up. And that's because the election code says the SDC gets to decide the replacements. But we still want a recommendation from the district, which is what this essentially is before you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there any objection to the recommending this item for adoption?
I'll object because I'd like to know what the AOS stands for right before other committee member, and it's also in it before congressional district AOS.
Mr. Chair, that's a mail merge issue with just putting this in an Excel spreadsheet and then pushing it into Word and then loading those Word docs into the Google Docs. So you would ignore that. That's a clerical thing. So I would clean that up, working with the parliamentarians when we do the new version of the rules once we're past convention and, subsequent updates.
All right. So, Keena, are you okay with that explanation?
That's fine. That makes perfect sense to me.
Perfect.
I'm okay with it.
Thank you. All right. I'm gonna try this one more time. Is there any objection to recommending this item for adoption? All right. Hearing none, the item is adopted. Next item, please.
The next item is party officer clarification, Rule 1017.
She's pulling that up. Thank you guys so much for your patience on the clarification of these items as well.
So the first resolve clause changes the title from public officers and candidates to party officers, public officers and candidates. The second resolve clause adds a sentence that reads, public officers are those who are elected to a partisan seat in a county, state, or federal jurisdiction. The next clause clarifies residency for party officers and adds a section on candidate eligibility. Not there. That should not be there. So it clarifies party officers and candidates for party office. And then the remainder of the residency section remains the same. And then it adds candidate eligibility. Candidates for any office are ineligible when they file for office with multiple parties during the same filing period. If during the period of the year of the filing through the final deadline to remove from the ballot, a candidate for party office publicly supports or endorses an opposing party or nominee of an opposing party, a person seeking the nomination of an opposing party, or a non-democratic candidate seeking an office in an election in which candidates may file by party affiliation, and a Democrat is seeking the office in question, they shall be declared ineligible for party office. Mr. Chair, that's to you.
Thank you so much. Just want to note that this is a relevant issue. We in North Texas, we saw this become an issue. So I just want you to really consider how you vote on this item. But this is very relevant, and it happens. Is there a point of information, Mr. Jimenez?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do recall what the chair just mentioned. I am familiar with those situations as well. On section C, does that also include independent candidates?
May I answer, Mr. Chair? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. I was gonna say, to my understanding, it would, if there's a Democrat seeking the office in question. They would be a non-democratic candidate seeking an office in an election in which candidates may file by a party affiliation.
Thank you.
All right. Don't see any other hands for points of information. So if there is there any objection to recommending this proposal for adoption? Hearing none, the proposal is adopted.
The next item is 1059-4, 1060-4.
Mr. Secretary.
Hmm?
Question.
It's just speak on it when it comes up.
Okay.
So I believe that so we've got two that are similar. I will show you the difference between the two. I'm going to read the primary authors. Whereas the role of state party chair is one that is of critical importance to Democratic state parties, and the tasks required of a chair frequently exceed well beyond 40 hours a week in labor that is unpaid beyond certain reimbursements. And whereas those tasks, including but not limited to fundraising, travel, candidate recruitment, coalition building, press, campaigning, statutory duties, and more, are vital to the function of the Texas Democratic Party and our county parties. And whereas many successful and thriving blue and purple Democratic state parties pay the position of state party chair, and the Republican Party of Texas, who has been dominant in their single party rule of Texas for 3 decades, pays their chair. And whereas the Democratic Party values align with that of the labor movement, where we believe in the dignity of fair pay for work. And whereas leaving the position of chair unpaid results in chairs and candidates for chair that are disproportionately retired or independently wealthy, leaving many people who might otherwise be qualified to be chair unable to serve due to the economic realities of requiring greater than full-time work out of a volunteer position. Now therefore be it resolved that the Texas Democratic Party amends its rules to pay the position of state party chair an annual sum of $150,000 and all benefits offered by the Texas Democratic Party to all full-time employees on the regular pay schedule for Texas Democratic Party staff. And be it further resolved that this rules change does not go into effect until the beginning of the next term for state party chair, beginning after the 2026 Texas Democratic State Convention, or in the event that a new chair is elected before the convention due to vacancy. And be it further resolved in the event of a shortage of funds, where the entirety of payroll cannot be met by Texas Democratic Party accounts, then all staff and employees of the Texas Democratic Party shall be paid before the chair, and that by passing this resolution, Texas Democrats are expressing increased expectations, responsibilities, and accountability from any state party chair that accepts pay for the position, especially regarding fundraising. That is 1059-4. There were a significant amount that were also for 1060-4. And the difference between those two is in the first resolved clause. Whereas 1059 lists a specific sum. 1060 says that the Texas Democratic Party amends its rules to pay the position of state party chair if the office holder chooses to work in the position full-time. And leaves everything else is the same, but it leaves out the specific amount. Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. Marco, did you have a point of information, or was there administrative procedure?
After talking with the authors, I do have an amendment and communicating with staff that's a little bit of a merge of the two and some. But yeah, if it's okay, if people have points of information and have some discussion before I offer that amendment, I think that would be appropriate, but happy to do whatever.
Thank you so much. I'd like to get to the points of information, and then we could consider that amendment. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the recognition. I just want to point out a few things first. Number one, this rule change has been something that, as myself as an SDEC member and the other SDEC members on this call, and almost 40 of them across our state, has been in support of, as originally authored under 1059, the original Andre Triber rule change amendment. I can offer some feedback. I'm not the original author, but I've worked very closely with the author to answer any questions. I myself am willing to offer an amendment to the rule as presented as well, immediately following any additional points of information. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I believe the next hand I see is Tracy.
Yes, I just had a point to inquiry. Isn't the approved amount that the Texas Republican Party approved for their chair also $150,000 back in 2018? As to where y'all got that amount?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
All right, and I'll be calling these names in the order that I see them. So, Alan.
Are you saying Alan?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. I had a couple of points of information as well as questions. This does say work in the position full-time. It does not describe or define full-time. Full-time to one person might not be the same amount of hours as another person's consideration for full-time. Also, I wanted to bring up the fact, who would be monitoring the amount of hours a full-time chair would be putting into the position? And so those are the questions that I think needs to be clarified. What is full-time? Let's say, for instance, if let's just say, for instance, hypothetically, a lawyer is hired to be full-time. Does that mean he gives up his law practice, or does he continue going all over the state in his law practice and occasionally taking care of the Texas Democrat Party business? So, Mr. Chair, those are some of the things that I think needs clarifying. It might even need being put into the rules here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your question. Marco, did you have a response to that?
Yeah, from speaking with, the original authors and talking about this, I feel decently confident that I can answer those questions. So this rule, in a way, purposefully is not devil in the details going to get into everything. And the reason being is because a lot of that stuff is not appropriate to go in a bylaws document. That is stuff that is appropriate for a budget process, which is essentially procedural rules, and also and in any procedural rules. So all of those things that you mentioned, as far as what is full-time defined, does this person qualify, capturing the amount of hours someone's working, etc., would need to be worked out with the governing board during the budget process and any procedural administrative standing rules or that would need to happen. So all of that would essentially be decided by the governing board in conjunction with working with staff and facilitating the budget process and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Miriam. Miriam, if you're speaking.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry. That was one of my questions was, is this actually in the budget? Where, it just says that, is there anything where it's talking about where this budget of the 150,000 is coming from? Because I have concerns if we're saying it's a full-time job, but yet if we don't have the money, they won't get paid. I mean, that I have some issues with that language, and it needs to be clear that if it's going to be specifically put in the budget each year, then, I mean, if we're putting it in because we want people, this is their job, this is their full-time job, and we want to have a salary that allows, everyday people to be able to compete for the party chair, that's great. But my concern is, if we're going to do that, we have to change that part of the language where it says, if the money is not there, then they just don't get paid. That's kind of where I'm having issues with.
Okay, I'm not sure if that was a question. Okay, this moment is kind of set aside for questions, points of information. So if you have a question, then please keep your hand raised, and I will call you in the order that I see hands raised. But if not, then we'll deal with that once we get to debate, if we get to debate. Right.
Mr. Chair, I feel like there was a question about budget. Do you mind if I answer that?
Sure.
Okay, so budget process. This right now, as it is talking about some point in the future, the SDEC approves their annual budget in the first quarter of each year, and it's effective from April 1 till March 31st of the next year. So that would be addressed at those times, right? The way that this one in front of you is written, it wouldn't be triggered until the 26th convention, which is in Corpus Christi, around June 20 something, like the last weekend or something like that. So in other words, July 1 of 2026, and the SDC in 2025, the last quarter, moving into the first quarter of 2026, would go through that budget process and know that this is an item that they would have to deal with. So that would be a process that the governing board would have to deal with, just like they do with all other line items.
Thanks so much. Omar.
Mr. Chair, on Rule 1060-4 on the now therefore be resolved, when it mentions if the office holder chooses to work in the position full time, just to clarify that, could that mean the person may volunteer to donate their salary back, or I would like some clarification on that language.
Mr. Chair, if I could clarify.
Yes, ma'am.
The intention is some chairs may not choose to work full-time. They may be an attorney who has a practice and would like to continue working in their practice. They may have a position, or they may be a person who does not have the time in their life to be full-time in the position. And because this is an elected position, we don't have control over that. So the salary is only if they're choosing to work full-time. If they choose to work part-time, they choose not to take the salary, that is up to them.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, Fidel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just looking at what are the following steps to this process? I mean,
See you over there. Love you.
Excuse me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes,
Please
go ahead.
Okay. What are the following steps to this process? I mean, I can understand what we're trying to do, but we got between here and the next cycle in Corpus as to how we're going to get this to happen. Are we going to seek a full-time application for people to apply for a full-time position? I mean, there's a lot of questions in trying to pass this without any real clarification as to what all the other steps are. I mean, does that mean now that the staff, if we do get a paid full-time chair, that we're going to reduce our staff? Question.
Just from, I'll go with the last question last, if that's okay, Mr. Chair. I think the idea, from what I understand, the author's intent is that if a chair is full-time, that they would be quite a bit more dedicated to the fundraising piece. So the idea is that this would be a cost, benefit, even though it may take a salary hit to the budget annually, that they would also raise on top of that. I can't remember what your other questions are. I'm sorry for that.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I mean, I know that we're trying to do the right thing. Was the application? Who's going to look at those applications of all the candidates that are going to be? I'm going to throw mine in right now. 150,000 is more than I ever made. Okay, no, yeah. I'm just kidding. But yeah.
So the one of the authors just texted me that I think I got the intent correct. So I'm glad they just texted me that. Okay. Your question as far as application, the process is no different